My pension vanished while I was baking his birthday cake, but the worst part wasn't the theft. It was realizing my son had done it with a smile. I remember the smell of vanilla and cinnamon, the hum of the mixer, the way I cracked eggs one by one into the bowl, thinking about how he used to lick the spoon when he was 5. I was scraping the frosting into a dish when I checked my balance out of habit. 0. Not low. Not short. Empty. Like 40 years of work had just disappeared through a crack I didn't even see forming. I didn't panic. I didn't even blink. I just stood there with a wooden spoon in one hand and my phone in the other, reading the numbers again and again like they might change if I stared long enough. I didn't suspect a stranger. I didn't wonder about hackers or banks. I knew. A mother always knows. It was him. The only person I'd ever trusted with my passwords. The one who'd held my hand during chemo and promised I'd never worry about money. The same boy I carried through fevers and heartbreaks. My son. My blood. I didn't call. I didn't cry. I just turned off the oven. Let the cake sink back into batter. Sat at the table and listened to the silence settle around me. No music. No TV. Just the soft, dull thud of betrayal pounding through my chest. I thought I might scream, but I didn't. I wrote down every login, every transfer, every withdrawal. I opened my notebook, the one I usually save for grocery lists and birthdays, and I started a new page. I titled it For the Judge, because I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I'd done enough of that in this life. I would let the paper speak. Let the truth rise like dough left too long. He thought I'd be too weak to notice, too tired to fight. But I wasn't confused. I was calculating. And this time I wasn't baking. I was building a case. I raised him alone. No child support. No weekend visits. Just me and a boy with wide eyes and a hunger I couldn't always feed. I worked. I cooked. I prayed for him more than I prayed for myself. I skipped dinners so he could have seconds. Told him my stomach was full even when it ached from emptiness. I stretched every dollar like it was elastic, made shoes last 2 winters, and turned hand-me-downs into something he could wear with pride. I remember sewing patches into his pants after working a double shift at the hospital. My fingers raw, my feet swollen, but I smiled when he said he liked the color of the thread. I used to leave little notes in his lunchbox, jokes he didn't always understand, but I wanted him to feel noticed, loved. I sold my grandmother's brooch to buy him his first bike. I remember the wobble in his legs, the way he shouted, "Don't let go," and how I pretended to hold on long after he found his balance. I stayed up all night when he had the flu, wiping his forehead and whispering lullabies he was too old for. I sat through school meetings, football games, spelling bees, sometimes the only parent in the crowd, sometimes the only one clapping. He never saw the bills piled up at home. He never knew I chose rent over medication more than once. I worked. I cooked. I prayed. I gave him my youth, my body, my peace. I didn't take vacations. I didn't remarry. I didn't even date. I wanted him to have all of me, to never feel like he came second. I remember the day he graduated college. I sat in the back row alone, wearing a second-hand dress and clutching the same purse I carried for 20 years. When he walked across that stage, I thought, he's going to build something better. For both of us. I believed that down to my bones. That all the sacrifices would come back to me in the form of care. Not riches, not praise, just presence. Respect. Maybe even a little softness when my knees gave out and my mind slowed down. When he got his first job, he called to say thank you. When he bought his first house, he sent a photo. I framed it, put it on the nightstand like a badge of honor. I bragged about him to strangers in waiting rooms. I made him his favorite meals every time he visited, even when he only stayed 10 minutes. I paid attention. I remembered. I celebrated him in all the quiet ways a mother does. I worked. I cooked. I prayed. Even when he started handling my finances just to make it easier, I didn't question it. I trusted him like I trusted the ground under my feet. I thought I had raised someone who would never let me fall. Someone who'd speak for me when I couldn't. Who'd protect me when I got too tired to protect myself. But now I see it. All those years I spent shielding him from the world, I forgot to teach him what it means to protect your own mother. I didn't know then that the boy I raised to believe he was the center of my world would grow into a man who thought I was just a source to drain. I worked. I cooked. I prayed. But I never thought to guard my heart from the one I loved most. He used to call every Sunday, like clockwork. We'd talk about the weather, what I made for dinner, whether the neighbor's dog was still barking too loud. But then the calls came later. Then not at all. I told myself he was busy, grown now with a life, responsibilities. I never wanted to be the kind of mother who guilt her child into attention. So I smiled when I said it out loud, even if it felt like a bruise inside. When he did visit, it was quick. A kiss on the cheek, a glance at his phone, a promise to stay longer next time. I held on to that promise like a thread. Then the questions started. Odd little comments that didn't sit right. Do you really need all that money just sitting there, Ma? He asked one evening, stirring the sugar into his tea too fast. You know you could help out more. Or at least let me invest some of it. I laughed, tried to brush it off. That's for emergencies, I said. He smiled back, but it didn't reach his eyes. Another time he said, You're lucky, Ma. Pretty soon you won't have to worry about remembering anything. It was a joke, but it made my hands cold. I told myself he didn't mean it. Just a rough week, maybe. Everyone says strange things when they're tired. Then my bank statement stopped showing up. I used to get them every month. I'd sit at the table with my reading glasses, a pen, and a cup of tea. But for 3 months, nothing. I asked the postman. He said maybe they went digital. I checked online, but the password didn't work. I told myself it was my memory, that I must have changed it and forgotten. I didn't want to believe anything else. When I mentioned it to my neighbor, Sweet June, who always brought me tomatoes from her garden, she raised an eyebrow. You sure he's not helping himself a little too much? She asked gently. I smiled, maybe too quickly. No, I said. He's just busy. He's a good boy. And I believed it as I said it, or I tried to, because admitting the truth would mean rewriting everything I'd built my life on. It would mean the hands I trusted to hold my future were already letting go. Little things disappeared, not just mail. A necklace I hadn't worn in years. The emergency money in the old tea tin. My credit card was declined once at the grocery store. I'd blamed the cashier, then the machine, then my own confusion. I started second-guessing everything. I even apologized to him once for being scatterbrained. He smiled and told me not to worry, said he'd handle everything. I wanted to believe him so badly that I silenced every warning bell screaming in my chest. I kept baking his favorite cookies, kept setting aside things I thought he might need, kept defending him in my heart even as it cracked. Because that's what mothers do. We hold out hope even when it's already gone. It was a Tuesday. I remember because it was senior discount day at the pharmacy. I had a list, nothing extravagant, just blood pressure pills, some ointment for my joints, and the little box of chocolates I like to keep in the fridge. When the cashier rang it up, I reached into my purse and handed her my card like I always did. She swiped. It beeped. Declined. She tried again. Still declined. People behind me started shifting, murmuring. I smiled, shaky, and said maybe the machine was broken. I used to be so careful. I knew every penny I had. So I came home and checked the balance online. 0. Not low. Not missing a payment. Just empty. Like 40 years of work had been wiped clean in a blink. I stared at the screen for a long time, like maybe I was reading it wrong. Then I called him. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what happened, tried to keep the fear from my voice. There was a pause, just long enough to make my heart drop. Then he said, calm and flat. Yeah, I moved it. Just for a while. Something came up. Just for a while. Like it was pocket change. Like it wasn't everything I had. I asked him what kind of emergency would need my entire pension. He got defensive. Told me I wouldn't understand. Said it was for something important. You don't need that much just sitting there, Ma. I told you. I reminded him that was my safety. My future. He sighed. Loud. Like I was a burden for even asking. Then he hung up. I called back. The call didn't go through. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I went online to check the account again, but the password didn't work. I tried the backup. Locked out. My email 2, password changed. I went to check the landline, and the dial tone was gone. Just silence. The next morning, the phone company confirmed it had been disconnected. He had access to everything. I had given it to him out of trust, out of love, out of believing that the boy I raised wouldn't turn on me. But he had, fully, without warning, without shame. I walked around the house like it might still be mine. But the walls felt tighter. The kettle screamed louder. And I felt smaller in every corner. The bills stacked up on the counter like little threats. I opened the fridge and saw nothing but milk and mustard. I sat in my own kitchen at my own table and realized I had no way to pay the water bill. No phone to call for help. And no son who would answer even if I could. He didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He just took everything while smiling. Like it was his right. Like I owed him for the life I gave him. And in that silence, with my accounts locked, my phone line dead, and my heart breaking, I finally understood it wasn't an accident. It wasn't stress. It wasn't confusion. It was betrayal. Complete. And calculated. I didn't sleep the night the money disappeared. I just lay in bed, hands folded over my chest, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of the bathroom sink. My body was still, but my mind was pacing. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I opened the hall closet and pulled out my old lockbox, the one I hadn't touched since I stopped working. Inside were folders, rubber bands, a faded envelope with my pension paperwork. I opened it slowly like it might crack. Every deposit, every rollover, every official stamp. I ran my fingers over the notches on the paper. Real, tangible, mine. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a notepad and started writing. Not thoughts, not feelings, facts, dates, numbers. I tracked every deposit that ever came in and every debit I didn't recognize. I circled amounts in red ink. The same hands that once packed his lunches were now building a case against him. It felt like stitching up a wound that hadn't stopped bleeding. But I kept writing. I called Doris next, a retired city clerk I'd once sat beside at choir practice. We hadn't spoken in years, but she answered like no time had passed. I told her I needed a favor. Quietly, discreetly. She didn't ask questions. She got me a copy of the account authorization forms, the ones he used to access my pension. I picked them up in a plain folder, walked it home under my coat like a fragile secret. And there it was, my name printed neat. And beneath it, a signature that wasn't mine. I stared at it for a long time, tilted the page, squinted, even laughed for a moment. Not because it was funny, because it was so foolish of him to think I wouldn't notice. My name, forged by my own son. That night, I didn't make dinner. I didn't turn on the TV. I just kept adding to the file. Receipts, letters, a printed email I remembered him sending with an excuse about a temporary transfer. I matched dates, noted inconsistencies. I wrote everything down. I was building a ladder out of paper, one that might lift me out of the pit he put me in. And then came the night I couldn't hold it anymore. I sat on the floor with the documents spread around me and let one tear fall. Just one. I didn't sob. I didn't wail. I just felt the truth wash over me like cold rain. He did this to me. And no one else was coming to fix it. So I picked up the phone, called the legal aid clinic I'd heard about from the community board. A young voice answered. "Do you need help with a financial issue, ma'am?" she asked gently. I cleared my throat. "Yes," I said. "I think my son stole my retirement." The line went quiet for a second. Then she said, "Come in. Bring what you have." I hung up, gathered my stack. I folded the last paper, put on my coat, and walked to the courthouse alone. Gloria was sharp. Mid-60s, short gray bob, eyes that didn't miss a thing. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a look that said, "I believe you." She reviewed my folder in silence, page by page, occasionally underlining something or nodding to herself. When she looked up, her voice was calm, but it carried weight. "This isn't just theft," she said. "This is fraud, and we're going to make it right." She took my case pro bono, said it reminded her of her own mother, said women like us, quiet, consistent, forgotten, needed to be heard, even if it was through paper. Within a week, she had filed emergency injunctions. The pension board was notified. Every transaction traced. Every forged signature matched against my original. She found bank accounts in his name that had no right to hold my money. She found transfers disguised as caregiver expenses. She found everything, and she brought it all to court. He was served at his office, not at home, not discreetly, at work. Gloria said, "Let him explain it to his colleagues." He called me the next day 5 times. I didn't answer. Then came the email, full of excuses and half-hearted apologies. "I just needed help, Ma. You weren't using it all. I was going to pay it back." I printed it, added it to the file. The hearing came 2 weeks later. I wore my best coat, the one I'd kept pressed in the back of the closet, waiting for a moment when I'd need to feel strong. I sat quietly on the bench, hands folded. I didn't speak once. Gloria spoke for me. The judge read parts of my written statement aloud, his voice steady and firm. My words, my pain, out in the open now, not hidden in notebooks or whispered in the dark. My son sat across the aisle, face flushed, eyes darting. He looked like a boy again, caught, cornered, undone. When they read the judgment, he didn't look at me. He just stared at the table like it might swallow him whole. The court ruled in my favor. Every cent returned. Additional damages awarded. Access revoked. His name removed from every account, every document, every key to my future. They even ordered an audit of his finances, a reminder that some things can't be brushed away. I walked out of that courtroom without a word. No gloating, no triumph in my stride, just peace. I had won, yes, but more than that, I had stood. For myself, for every mother who thinks silence is the only shield she has. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't make a scene. I sat in silence while the court returned what he stole and stripped him of what he thought was his. My dignity, my future, my name, all returned, stamped and sealed by justice that moved quiet but cut deep. I never spoke to him again. Not a word. Not a glance in his direction. Even as the bailiff handed him the repayment schedule. Even as the penalties stacked higher than he'd imagined. I kept my gaze on the window behind the judge, the light falling across the courtroom floor like a ribbon of grace. He tried to meet my eyes. I let him try. Let him sit in that silence he once gave me when my fridge was empty and my pension was gone. The court ordered full repayment. Every penny. With interest. They froze his accounts until restitution was made. He'd never be able to borrow against my name again, legally or emotionally. Gloria handed me the final ruling with a small smile, and I nodded. No celebration, no applause, just quiet justice, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Back home, I opened the drawer where our joint savings account paperwork had once been kept. He thought he bled it dry, but he forgot about the small CD I'd rolled over years ago. The one he didn't know about. I cashed it, sold off what remained. I kept enough for comfort, not luxury, just dignity. The rest I donated to a local women's shelter. In my mother's name. Not his, not mine, just hers, because she raised me to stand back up. A week later, a delivery came. Roses. White, too perfect, too late. I didn't open the card. Just handed them right back to the courier and asked that they be returned. I didn't need his apologies wrapped in ribbon. I had my own peace now, and it didn't come in a vase. Instead, I sat by the window that night and poured tea for one. My favorite mug, the good honey, silence all around. And I toasted, not to revenge, to peace, because I had it again. And this time it was mine alone. Before bed, I wrote one final note, not to him, to the judge. Just a short letter, handwritten and folded neatly. Thank you for giving me my name back. No address needed, just my return to myself. The letters started coming a few weeks after the ruling. Long ones, some typed, some in shaky handwriting I almost didn't recognize. He said he was sorry, that he'd made a mistake, that he'd lost his way. He said the money never mattered, only family did. But he didn't say that when he took it. He didn't say that when he changed the passwords or disconnected the phone or left me staring at an empty bank account and a pile of unpaid bills. The voicemails followed, at first once a week, then every other day. His voice cracked in the third one. He cried in the sixth, said he missed me, that he was different now, that he hoped I could find it in my heart. But forgiveness isn't something I hand out like loose change. Not anymore. One Sunday morning, I heard a knock. I peeked through the curtain and saw him standing there, holding a paper bag and a bouquet of sunflowers. I watched him wait. 5 minutes. 10. He looked around, like he expected me to appear from behind a door and make it all better. I didn't open it. I sat in the next room with my book and a cup of tea, letting the clock do what I couldn't, move on. My sister called. He's hurting, she said. My cousin wrote, you know he's still your boy. I nodded. I didn't argue. I just smiled and folded their words into the drawer with the rest. Because the truth is simple, I raised him. I loved him. But I don't owe him the rest of me. I spend my days differently now. Mornings start with a short walk and a longer stretch. I take painting lessons at the community center every Tuesday. So far, I've painted a pear, a crooked cat, and something that looks like a sunset if you squint. The women there laugh easy, and so do I. I haven't laughed like this in years. Not politely, not to fill a silence, but fully, freely. I joined the book club, started bringing muffins. I learned how to use the library's computers, and I'm slowly typing out my story. Not for anyone else, just for me. My life, in my words. On paper, I control. I bake cookies now just because I want to, not because someone's coming over. I plant herbs on the balcony and hum songs I used to sing to myself when he was small. His calls still come, but I don't listen to the voicemails anymore. I delete them before the first syllable. Not out of hate, not out of bitterness, but because I've learned that peace isn't something you beg someone else to give back. It's something you build when you stop waiting for the apology to fix what was broken. I raised him. I loved him. But I don't owe him the rest of me. I wake up early now, not from worry, just from habit. I brew tea in a quiet kitchen. No ticking clock counting down to bills or betrayal. Just the rustle of leaves outside the window and the soft creak of my knees. I step out to the garden most mornings. The roses are coming back this year. The mint's stubborn and the basil always leans too far toward the sun. But I love it for that. I dig my hands into the soil and remember what it's like to grow something that gives back. Something that doesn't ask for more than it needs. I learned how to use online banking. Passwords only I know. I check it once a week. Not obsessively, just enough to remind myself I'm in control now. I even helped a friend set hers up. She called me tech savvy. We laughed until we cried. I keep a mirror by the hallway. Just a small one. I stop at it sometimes and say hello. Not in pity. In pride. I look at the lines around my eyes and think of all the nights I stayed up with sick babies, unpaid bills, broken promises. And I survived all of it. I wear my age like a soft armor now. Earned, polished, and no longer hidden. I know now I'll never be fooled again. But I didn't harden. I didn't curl in on myself. I stayed open, gentle, but with gates. And this time, I saved something for myself.